whoa, did you have a wham damn doozle of a beginning of a book?
Yeah.
You say that on June 2nd, 2014, my life fell apart. My mother had recently been diagnosed with terminal cancer, you say.
Yes.
And given 3 months to live. And you say, that morning, I suffered my third miscarriage, and my husband left me. He broke up with me over the phone.
I woke up that morning, I was a very early pregnancy. And I woke up that morning to bleeding, and it
Yes.
occurred to me that what was happening.
You were having a miscarriage.
Yes. And he was already at work because he had to go to work really early. And I called him and I said, I have to go to the gynecologist just to get blood work to make sure that this is what's happening.
Yeah.
Can you come with me? Can you meet me there? And he said, no, I'm really busy at work. And I said, okay. So I went by myself. And this was something I had to do by myself before.
Yeah.
And then it was confirmed. And so I came home and I texted him saying, what time are you going to be home tonight? And he said, I'm going to stay at my parents'. And I said, and I knew in my bones, in my body, that he was fleeing. And I said, well, what do you mean? And then I called him, and what ensued was a conversation where he was basically telling me that we are on two different paths. And I went a little hysterical because I thought, you can't do this way. Mm-hmm. You can't do it like this. That's very wrong. I kept saying to him, it's not the right thing to do, and you're going to regret it.
Yeah.
And you're the one who's going to have to live with that for the rest of your life. But did we see each other again? For sure. But did he ever come home again? Never again.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And you felt what?
Devastation.
Devastation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Devastation. I remember having this thought, oh, this is what it means when someone says that their world has completely fallen apart. This is what it means when everything
Your mom's
falls
been
apart.
given 3 months to live with terminal cancer. You've had your third miscarriage, and your husband says, I'm not coming home.
Yes.
And it's just not working out for me. Had you sensed that it wasn't working?
We had problems. Mm-hmm. I always said that before we got married, our relationship was about 90% great and 10% very problematic. Now, you could say, well, that's a pretty good stat. But the 10% that was problematic was profoundly problematic. The things that today I would never ignore. So people think that when they get married, their problems are going to go away. But
that the marriage is going to heal that thing.
The marriage is going to heal it. No, the marriage only shines a light
on
what's...
big magnifying glass on it.
Correct.
That's what it does.
So then the 10% became the 90%, and the 90% became the 10%. So our marriage was very problematic, somewhat focused around the fact that I wanted to wait to have children. He wanted children right away. We didn't have those important conversations. And he started to do this thing where if he were upset with me, he would completely withdraw and completely shut down, which was a humongous trigger for me. And he did it a little bit before we got married. And there was something very significant that happened before we were married where he pulled away. And I didn't handle it in a way that I would have handled it today.
That if you had been more mature or wizened,
yes,
you would have said,
yes,
not me.
Not me. Yeah. Or more courageous and more sure of myself.
And so you picked yourself off the floor. You were devastated.
Yeah.
And how long after that moment were you able to start to rebuild?
Well, when that happened, I became obsessed with two things. One, how am I going to get myself out of this hole? Mm-hmm. How am I going to get myself off the ground?
Yes.
And two, what makes a relationship work? Because I could not believe, now looking back, I can understand it, but at the time, I could not believe that I was 40 and getting a divorce or separated.
Yes.
And that this was my destiny. That's how I thought of it.
That's not the narrative you had written for yourself.
And I could not believe that I was in this position. I had been a yogi for many years. I considered myself to be mature. I considered myself to be self-aware. And so it was shocking to me. And I thought, I need to figure this out. I must figure this out. And it became an obsession.
Oh, so let's talk about your father for a moment. Famed psychiatrist, Dr. Stanley Turecki. I remember him in 1985. He wrote a best-selling book called The Difficult Child. And I remember having him on the Oprah show a couple times and people really loving his advice because the advice was all about how to handle the difficult child. And part of that theory was it's not your fault if you have a difficult child. Children are just born that way.
Yeah.
And these are the things you need to do. Now, isn't part of the problem that parents want their children to conform to whatever their needs are at the moment?
That is part of the problem. And if you have one of these children of the kind that I described, they almost always are highly individualistic, very interesting, and they don't give in easily. And so you can have a lot of power struggles between a parent who says this is the way it should be and the child who simply will not give up on their own preferences.
What was the premise of that book in your mind?
Yeah, that children are born with we're all born with
Yeah.
a specific genetic makeup
Right.
that makes it so that we have a proclivity towards a certain personality
Right.
or certain, he didn't use this word, but like a certain nervous system, a certain way of being, and that you might have this difficult child.
That is just their nature.
And that is just their nature. And so if you are struggling, here's the compassion. You know, it's not you, it's not your fault. You didn't create this. And here are the tools on how to create more peace in your family life because the difficult child is definitely disrupting.
Okay, so here's our connection. It turns out you were the difficult child he was
Yes.
talking about in
Yes.
the title. How did that label impact you?
Well, hugely because he mentioned me in the book. And the new edition, he took that out for my request. So, of course, as a young child, I was like, I'm famous. This is amazing. I felt significant. I felt like a book is being written about me. This is amazing.
Yes.
And then as I started to get older, I realized, wow, this label is like a heavy bag that's resting on my shoulders that I can't get off. It follows me wherever I go. And so if
But he did say you were funny and you had other personality traits that were...
Absolutely. He said, and that once I became a certain age, I grew out of it. I grew
Yes.
out of it. So all is not lost. Yes, but it was all part of this, he called it a syndrome, the
Yes.
difficult child syndrome. So the
Yep.
difficult children can also be incredibly creative. They can have a lot of them can have good social skills. You know, these are not the children who need to be hospitalized for behavioral stuff. They kind of teeter that line. And I just, every time I made a mistake or every time I was very sensitive to something, because that really is what a difficult, quote unquote, difficult child is. I do believe that we have certain nervous systems that we are born into and that can start in the womb. And some people are just more sensitive than others. And so when you're a child and you have a high degree of sensitivity, you don't know and you don't have the emotional regulation skills. The only emotional regulation skills you're learning are those of mom and dad.
That's right.
And my parents had a terrible marriage.